Self-evaluation of projects. This video was shot at the Interreg event Impact Evaluations, Methods and Terms of References on the 21st of June 2016 in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. In this video, Declan McGarrigle from the Special EU Programmes Body will explain how the Peace Programme supported their projects in doing self-evaluations. He also points out the benefits and challenges of such an approach. At the end of the presentation, he refers to available toolkits which can be used by all programmes who are considering such an approach.
So there was a recognition at the end of probably around 2007, 2008, as we developed Piece 3, that there was a need to work out a methodology that critically assessed what the impact that the Peace Programme was having in the region. So as I said, the Peace Programmes are unique. They're different to some of the more standard social economic impacts that some of the other cooperation programmes within the Interreg family are having. And there was a need to provide a structure for projects and indeed the programme to follow that would really establish what those impacts that the programme is having on the ground within the region. So the objective really was around, in terms of the Aid for Peace approach, was to facilitate the planning and evaluation of peace aid interventions that were taking place in situations of violent conflict or in the aftermath of violent conflict. So I suppose I am caveating everything I say today. You know, the methodology won't completely apply to a more standard cooperation project, but there may be aspects of this that you may find interesting and that you may be able to adapt and use for your own programs. So in terms of the methodology itself, the evaluation framework really had four different critical stages to this. So the four stages really are around peace building needs analysis, the relevance assessment then in terms of peace building, and then there was a look at the conflict risk assessment, and then ultimately what the impact is going to be was the fourth stage. The first three of these stages really should be looked at during the application phase in terms of establishing need, relevance, looking at some of those external factors that may have an effect on the project. And the impact then in terms of the fourth stage, is really something then that the project has to be evaluated against throughout their period of the project. Stage one then, just to go into this in a little bit of further detail in terms of the needs analysis. Really the project during the application phase and ultimately at the contract stage should establish what the current situation is in the area in relation to peace and reconciliation needs, identify the peace building needs in the region, establish some key indicators around the conflict and the project. Stage two then looked at the operational level needs, looking at the promotion of change, theories of change, the development of some of those relationships that are necessary through the project. And then stage three really was looking at those external risk factors that could impact on the project or the operation. And outline some of those actions that the project would be taking in order to provide some contingency plans in relation to that. And then stage four was really, as I said, looking at the impact further down the line. So once the actual, I suppose, methodology had been followed in terms of the Aid for Peace approach, from our own perspective as a programme, we required each peace project to provide us with 3 different reports. So there was 3 different reporting periods. So at the contract stage, when the letter of offer was being developed, we asked for an initial report, a baseline report. So very much following that structure that was set out in the previous slides. Then we asked projects in terms of the self-evaluation process to provide a mid-term evaluation of their project. And this really would be looking at evaluating progress, learning the key lessons, so a time for reflection in terms of the direction of the project, what impact it was having in that brief period up until that point, and making recommendations at that stage in terms of how the project could be improved or redesigned in some respects to fulfill the ultimate objectives that the programme had set for the project. And then finally, what we asked for was a post-project evaluation, so a final project evaluation. And this really would be used to feed into the overall programme level evaluations and programme level learning as well. What needs to improve, what's coming out of that project in terms of recommendations, and monitoring and evaluating the impact, which is obviously critical from our own point of view as well. And there's a range of quantitative, qualitative methods, different techniques the projects could use to complete certainly the midterm and the final project evaluation. But the structure itself, in terms of that Aid for Peace approach, runs through all of these evaluations. So I suppose just some key questions that we would ask projects, and indeed from a programme point of view, to consider. What is the length of the project? Is the project broken into different phases? Is the second phase of a project conditional on a rigorous mid-term evaluation? Is there a need, from the programme's point of view, to reconfirm the decision to allocate funding? There's a consideration in terms of, from a programme point of view, in terms of whether it's appropriate for a project to self-evaluate. What's the complexity of the project? Does it involve a significant number of sectors, beneficiaries, stakeholders? What is the project's geographic scope? Is it possible for the partnership to effectively evaluate the full geographic area and the impacts that it's having? Who is the project's potential audience? I think is also an important question to consider. It's important from the programme's point of view that the programme provides information on this and states what the programme's expectations are in terms of the evaluation. And really, this is around ensuring that ultimately the evaluations that are presented to the programme are appropriate and are credible. So do think, if you are going down this route, to really make those expectations clear to your projects. And what the other thing to consider as well from a project point of view and from a programme point of view is the level of the partnership's capacity to actually carry out an effective evaluation. What is their level of experience? Do they have enough expertise to do this? What sort of assistance do they need in terms of the self-evaluation process? The other thing as well is, and obviously I'm conscious in terms of some of the things that we've talked about over the last couple of days around resources the programmes have, that projects have, in order to be able to do all of this. Proportionality is key to all of this. Programmes and projects should think about all these questions. Is this viable? Is this feasible within the scale of the budgets that each programme is working to, and indeed the projects are working to? So you do need to take all this into consideration and have a proportionate response and evaluation plan for projects to follow. In terms of the support that we provided to projects, in the previous programme period, we did allow for an eligible cost for projects around evaluations. This was after a certain period capped at €6,000 per project. So there was support in terms of financial assistance for projects to be able to self-evaluate and to be able to develop those evaluation reports. We also engaged a government agency in Northern Ireland called the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency to assist us with this evaluation process. So we brought a number of their staff members in-house into the managing authority, and they worked with us to support projects throughout the process from the start of the programme. So they were critical, and again, this is around resources. Do you have the resources to do this? Because it's important that you have that expertise and resource to support projects throughout the process. We also set up a number of working groups. The PEACE programme was set up, was divided into a number of different thematic areas. Some of those thematic areas had a working group that acted to support projects who were self-evaluating. So there was a support structure at that level. They provided advice and guidance and fed into the overall evaluation process. We also have an evaluation working group made up of monitoring committee members, so a subcommittee or subgroup of the monitoring committee. And again, this was an important support structure to yourselves as the programme, to the managing authority, to the joint secretariat, and ultimately trickled down to the projects as well. We engaged in one-to-one support on an ongoing basis through the JS and the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency staff. So one-on-one support with projects as they work through their evaluations. So reviewing terms of reference, providing advice and guidance on the midterm evaluation before it's submitted, and similarly with the post-project evaluation. We also initiated we also had lead partner seminars, and part of that was we did have evaluation events as well, which provided a helpful support structure over and above some of the other elements. And ultimately as well, we also had hopefully clear guidance notes that were available to projects that provided a structure for them to work through. And the other thing as well is that an organisation within Northern Ireland called the Centre for Cross-Border Studies developed a toolkit during the last programme period, which helped as a helpful tool for projects in terms of self-evaluation. So I've got a link to that at the end of the presentation, and I would advise that you go on and have a look at that. If you are going down this route, it's also a helpful toolkit that can be provided to projects as well, which takes them through this full process. So as I said at the start, there are obviously some benefits to this approach in terms of self-evaluation, and there are also obviously a number of challenges and significant risks that you would need to consider. So just to take the benefits first, in theory, the approach, the Aid for Peace approach and the structure that provided and the range of evaluations was supposed to be, or should have been, less onerous for projects. So that was the theory, and I'll come to that in a little bit more detail in a moment. The approach did provide a common reporting structure, so it did provide a structure through which the anticipated and actual impacts of the project or the operation on peace and reconciliation, or some of those other impacts, social and economic impacts, could be defined. It also, as I said earlier, provided certainly the mid-term evaluations and indeed the post-project evaluations, provided a key point for projects to take some time out and consider or reflect upon the progress of the project and to look at recommendations in terms of improving that approach, but ultimately with the goal in terms of fulfilling the objectives of the project and having the greatest level of impact. At the programme level, the evaluations, obviously with an evaluation for each of the projects, this fed into the overall programme level evaluations. So it was used for annual implementation reports, and it was also used in terms of developing the scope and the nature of the new programme as well. So it was a helpful tool from a programme point of view in terms of assessing that impact ultimately at the programme level and looking ahead to future programmes and the recommendations that were required for that. In terms of some of the challenges then, as I said, in theory, this approach should have been more simplistic, should have been less onerous, but in reality, it was resource intensive, both at the programme level. As I said, we had to have staff working on this. We had to bring staff in from the Northern Ireland Statistics and Research Agency to assist us with this process. There is obviously a lot of advice and guidance that you need to provide to projects and support them throughout that process. So the reality of it was that it was resource intensive at both those levels, at the programme level and at the project level. There is also an argument that self-evaluation by its very nature lacks independence, that it lacks quite often some of the specialist expertise that may be needed to critically assess the impacts that the project is actually having. And that is a key consideration and key risk that you have to consider. There was also, obviously as well, in terms of the evaluations that were presented, quite often they weren't of sufficient quality. Projects perhaps didn't engage with the support structures that were there. There is a need, and this relates to the final point as well, there is a need for buy-in from projects. If you set out on this approach, there's risks around the loss of key staff, for example. So you may have someone that's quite engaged at the commencement of the project in terms of self-evaluation, in terms of the Aid for Peace approach. If they leave halfway through the project, you're having to almost start the process over again. You have to get that buy-in again from key staff, and that is a major challenge certainly that we experience. So that loss of knowledge and expertise in terms of the approach is a key risk. In terms of self-evaluation, that's still available on our website that you can download. We did provide a structure in terms of the post-project evaluation report, and that's just an overview of it there, and you can have a look at that by downloading this from our website. In terms of the project evaluation toolkit, there's a link there. I would strongly recommend that you download that. Just to have a read through in terms of what the process is, what the expectations are. And if you were using an approach like this in the future, this is something that's useful to provide to your projects for further advice and guidance. The Piece 3 evaluation guidance note is there in terms of the link, and that is also where the template is available in terms of that structure. And if you're interested in finding anything else out about the Peace programme, do download our citizen summary, or you can find further information on our website for SU2B.
If you'd like to see more details about the evaluation of Interreg programs and projects, please check out the different models Interreg produced. In each of the models, you will find various materials such as videos, guidance papers, Q&A documents, links, and other details.